Every great song utilizes a specific vocal mixing technique, seamlessly blending the instrumental and vocals together like perfectly fitting puzzle pieces. Having mixed countless tracks myself, I've discovered this singular vocal trick consistently delivers great results every time, and once I show it to you, I'm confident you'll be using it in every mix too. But before we start, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, I recommend checking out Sage Audio's Mixing and Mastering membership. As a member, I have to say the experience is incredible. Just for signing up, you receive 10 pre-mastered songs per month, with your own dedicated mastering engineer, unlimited mixing feedback, and access to Sage Audio University for in-depth mixing and mastering courses, but more on that at the end of the video. In any mix you work on, you're going to encounter this issue. Where the vocal and instrumental clash due to overlapping frequencies that are present in both tracks. Looking at these two frequency analyzers, you can see that they both occupy a lot of the same frequency range, meaning that at any point in the song, these two tracks will be fighting for space in the mix when playing together. If you've ever had any experience producing a track, it's very similar to a common issue you'll run into there when layering two sound sources together that are playing the same note. For instance, if I play this piano note, and then I play the exact same note on a synth, once I layer these two sounds together, you can hear how the synth kind of gets lost and is fighting for space with the piano note, as they both occupy a similar frequency range. This is the exact same problem you'll encounter when mixing vocals into an instrumental. And to make things even harder, these frequencies are constantly changing and shifting, so simply EQing the instrumental to fit your vocal or vice versa won't really work here. So here's the solution to this problem. Every track you can see here in my mix, except for the vocal, has all been routed to this one single bus that I've called instrumental. If I solo this out, you'll hear that everything is playing other than my vocal track. I want my instrumental bus to be able to hear my lead vocal, which is what the term sidechaining refers to. This vocal has already been mixed, as you can see here. So to allow my instrumental bus to hear the processed version, I need to send it pre-fader to separate outputs on my instrumental bus. This works like a ghost version of my processed vocal sound. You won't hear this signal being duplicated within my mix as I'm sending it to a separate output on my instrumental bus, which isn't then being sent back out to my master bus. Instead, we're simply going to be using this signal to trigger a separate process, which I'm going to be showing you shortly. Sending it pre-fader is also very important in this case, as the processing you applied to your vocal track will alter its frequency response, and we want the instrumental bus to hear the most accurate version of our vocal track for this mixing trick to give us the best sounding result possible. So make sure you check that you're sending this track using the pre-fader post-effects option when setting up your sidechain signal. And then for the second part of this trick, you want to add a dynamic resonance suppressor, something like Soothe 2, Silk Vocal, or Smooth Operator, to the instrumental bus. This is going to help solve the issue I mentioned earlier about the constantly changing frequencies within our two tracks. These types of plugins work by analysing your specific audio source, and then it can intelligently reduce areas of frequency overlap once you activate the sidechain option within the plugin window. If you haven't used a plugin like this before, it works in a very similar way to a dynamic EQ or multiband compressor, where you can target specific areas in the frequency range. However, the benefit to using a dynamic resonance suppressor over something like a dynamic EQ or multiband compressor is that it can be far more specific and accurate than setting this up manually. It's able to change the affected frequency areas on the fly, rather than just being fixed to one spot, like with a regular dynamic EQ or multiband compressor. So this is one case where using a smart plugin really makes sense, as you couldn't feasibly do this all manually by ear. There's actually a lot going on behind the simple interface that you see within the plugin window to help analyze the track that you're applying the processing to. As for the settings on this plugin, I found that using a band shelf with a very wide Q factor works best. This allows you to target all the frequency overlap that I showed you was present in both of my tracks earlier. You can also use a band pass on this plugin to stop any of the low end in your instrumental from being affected by this processing. You won't often need any sub information or much of the low end from most vocal tracks, so preserving this in your instrumental is much more important in this case. Once you've set the bands, you can then alter the sharpness and selectivity buttons to make this effect as broad or specific as your track requires. So decreasing these two parameters will widen the notches, giving you a more overall tone shaping, whereas increasing these two parameters will narrow these notches. allowing you to be much more specific with the processing and exactly what frequencies are being affected by it. Make sure to also select the sidechain option within the plugin window to allow Soothe 2 to read your incoming sidechain signal. So once you've set the sharpness and selectivity buttons accordingly, I tend to like them somewhere in between the most narrow and wide settings. You can then dial in exactly how much of this effect you want by adjusting the depth knob. The more you increase this, the heavier this effect will become on the instrumental bus. Keep in mind that we're using the vocal track to trigger this effect, so make sure you set your playhead at a point where both tracks are playing together. You won't hear any effect happening if there's no vocal playing, as you need this signal present in order to trigger the plugin to affect the track you've placed it on. The trick is also to use a subtle amount of this effect, as too much can quickly deteriorate the punch and clarity in your instrumental, but just the right amount will sound transparent enough, whilst perfectly fitting your vocals into the instrumental. Let's take a quick listen to how my track sounds with and without this effect. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the reason you want to use a plugin like Soothe 2 for this trick is because of the way it can analyze both of your audio sources and then adjust things accordingly. However, if you don't have any of these types of plugins, or just prefer not to use them, the next best option would be to use a multi-band compressor instead. Sometimes I've actually found this can work slightly better, mostly on more heavy and dense styles of instrumentals. As there's a lot more frequency content going on in those styles of mixers, you may not want to affect as much of this with a smart plugin, but instead target a very specific area with a multi-band compressor. The same concept as before still applies, with setting up your sidechain so that your instrumental can hear the vocal track. The only real difference in this case is the area in which you want the multi-band compressor to target. A lot of the articulation and intelligibility in a vocal can be found around the 2 to 4K area. So this is a frequency range we really want to target with this effect. By compressing just this area alone with a multi-band compressor, we can add a lot more clarity to the mix whenever the vocal track is playing. And once a vocal drops out, this frequency range will no longer be affected, as we're using the vocal signal to trigger the multi-band compressor only when the vocals are present in the mix. So you can see here how I've set the region to only roughly target the 2 to 4K area. If I solo this out for you, you can hear how most of this area is made up of more harsh elements in my mix. By reducing this and leaving more room in my vocal track to cut through, it's really helping to gel both elements together. You won't lose any of the punch in the instrumental, and you'll actually increase the clarity of your mix, as the vocals will now cut through much more easily. Be sure to once again check the sidechain option within the plugin itself to make sure it can hear your vocal signal. Let's do a quick A/B of this trick using a multi-band compressor so you can hear what it sounds like with and without this trick applied. And now, just for fun, we can also compare how this trick sounds using the dynamic frequency suppressor from earlier versus a multi-band compressor. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, I encourage you to check out Sage Audio's Mixing and Mastering membership. As a member, I have to say the experience is incredible. Just for signing up, you receive 10 free mastered songs per month with your own dedicated mastering engineer, unlimited mixing feedback, and access to Sage Audio University mixing and mastering courses, which include start-to-finish walkthrough sessions for various genres and 35 multi-track sessions for hands-on practice. This platform is supported by their thriving community and tight-knit network of audio engineers. Every day, I see and hear great wins in the membership from both new and seasoned engineers, noticing a huge improvement in their mixes and masters after joining. Right now, you can join the membership with a 70% lifetime discount, bringing the cost down to just $15 per month. So join today and start creating mixes that sound like professional songs.